Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the final FEDSA meetup of 2021. We are just going to start off quickly. I'm just going to, you can see all the presenters are here. It's myself, Skulk, Martin, and Jane. And we're going to be just talking about some little bits of HTML that you may not be aware of and some cool things that we can do in the browser without needing to do any JavaScript necessarily, which is always a good thing. And yeah, just to start off, we just want to thank our recurring sponsors who are NML, who sponsored us since we started, coming up on 10 years next year. So this is our 9th year of doing meetups. So we'll be turning 10 next year, an auspicious occasion, I think. So NML have been sponsors since the beginning, and IO, who joined a couple of years ago. That's IO Digital, development and design company in Cape Town. And yeah, many thanks there to Liesel from IO, who's been a great supporter of ours over the years. Right, so as I said, we're going to have 4 lightning talks today. And on that schedule we'll start off with Skulk Venter, who's going to be talking about Datalist. Then we have Jane Hain on picture, Martin Kruger on the progress and meta element, and I'll end it off with talking about details and summary. If you have any questions, please pop them into the live chat on YouTube, and they show up for us in the studio here. So we will add them to the screen and answer your questions as well as we can. So we'll have a little bit of time after each talk for any questions that there might be. Right, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Skulk.
Cool.
And get rid of the rest of us.
Bye, guys. Can you hear me okay? I assume so. I hope you'll let me know if you can't hear me. So, yeah. First and foremost, as Justin said, thanks everyone for joining. It's been a strange year. I think this is the first time that we're doing these kind of lightning talks virtual. So we'll see how it goes. We have to date never been on schedule, so touch wood. Hopefully tonight's the first. Hopefully virtual's the charm, and for the first time ever, we'll actually finish on schedule. As Justin mentioned, if you have any comments or questions, yeah, just pop them in the YouTube chat. I'm more than happy to kind of address any specific questions that there are. All right, so let me just share my screen. Cool. Justin, I think you need to just have my screen show up. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I think I initially started by preparing a presentation, and kind of as I went into it, I kind of realized that it's probably better if I maybe just show in practice like how one can use the data list and so forth. And the data list to me is one of those HTML attributes that not a lot of people know about. We often grab like JavaScript libraries to kind of do this type of thing. At the end, I'm going to talk about when you might want to use a JavaScript library instead of just data list. Yeah, there are cases where data list is sufficient. So first and foremost, let me just start with an example to kind of show kind of where a data list might be useful. So I'm just going to... I hope this is big enough. Justin, I assume you will just let me know if my screen is too small. So let me just create a form. So let's just create a form. Let's just say the action is a hash. That just means when the form gets submitted, it just goes to the same page. And let's say this is a form for, let's just do an H1, and let's say it's a ice cream selector. Okay, I think that the ice cream is the one they actually have on MDN. So you guys are probably familiar with a regular select. So if we go select, And then let's add some options. So let's say option, let's say vanilla. Yeah, I'm just going to do 3. Otherwise, let's say strawberry. Otherwise, I'm going to run out of. I'm going to show my lack of knowledge of ice cream flavors. Cool. So this is probably something that all of you are familiar with. Is a select. So let's also just do a submission button. Okay, so let's do a button. By default, all buttons in a form, the first button in a form is a submit, but I like to just make it explicit. And let's also just say, let's make the button actual ice cream emoji. Okay, let's take this one. Cool. And also ARIA label, just because obviously for accessibility, this isn't going to read as ice cream, so let's just call it submit. Okay. Obviously, you wouldn't create something like this in the real world. Cool. So obviously, strawberry, chocolate, vanilla, and then you submit it. And CodePen, obviously, the submission doesn't work on CodePen, which is all right. We can just emulate the functionality. So then, secondly. One thing though is we also don't want to have an option be selected. So a common way to do this is, make it disabled and selected at the same time. Then it just starts as blank. And so we want someone to select an option, so we can just make this select required. Okay. So now if you try and submit it, we're going to get an error. So this is just default behavior in the browser. Cool. So also, by the magic of time traveling, I just before this talk, I just did some basic styling for this. So let me just add a quick Google font up here. What was it? I don't know how I pronounce it. I'm just going to say Duomini. And then let me so I just wrote a little bit of CSS. This is just quickly scan through it, but it's just some basic styling on the tags and so forth. Let me just zoom out a little bit. And I think, let's just make this an H1. There we go. Here's our ice cream selector. There's our button. It says we need to select one, and then I just added this little hover effect. So if we click on it, we need to select one, and then there we submit it. Okay, so now this is great. This works in most circumstances. When does it not work that great? So in UX, there's this concept of what's it? Let me just super professionally do a quick Wikipedia. I think it's magic number 7 less than, I can never remember the name. It's called the magic number 7 plus or minus 2. So essentially it just says generally we are able to consider things as a whole when there's around 7-ish of them. If it's more than that, we start having, we can't, it's hard for us to kind of glance at a thing as a single thing. So obviously here we can very quickly see what are the options. But then obviously it gets more trickier if we have loads of options. And a very common use case is if you have countries. So first and foremost, once again, through the magic of time travel, I just prepared this previously, just all the countries and their actual country codes. I didn't type this out by hand. I just did web scraped it and used a node script. But regardless, so you might have a server generating this or whatever. So this here it becomes a bit trickier. So, if we click here, now we have to scroll through all of these. And let's also just change this to country selector. And let's also just change that little ice cream to just for the sake of completeness. Earth. Ooh. There we go. Cool. So, for example, if I want South Africa, so I am pretty technically literate, so I know I can press S, and that's going to take me to all the S's. Someone like my dad or my mom would probably scroll through this and search for S, but I think even if I just go to S, then I still need to scroll through all the S's, and there's South Africa. Cool. So, this is okay, because like a country list is maybe not the best example to illustrate this, because we're kind of all very familiar with what the countries are. But if you have something like really long, for example, like let's say, if I go to Takealot or whatever, and I search for, it's the weirdest recommendations, and I start typing for table, so you generally want something like this, where it kind of gives you recommendations as you're typing, and that's what we can do with the data list. So let me show you how to do that. So actually we already have the basic structure here. So all that we do is we just create a data list, okay, and we give it an ID. Let's just call it countries. Okay, and let me just close it again, and then it still uses the exact same syntax. So I can just copy all of these options. So instead of putting it inside a select, I just put it inside the data list, and the data list can go anywhere in the HTML document, because you're just referencing it. It's not outputting anything. So you'll see like this is not getting outputted anywhere. It's kind of almost like a template, like the template element, insofar that it doesn't actually output anything. So what we can now do is we can take this and we can change it into an input. Okay. Oops. Okay, so let's just change our styling. So instead of applying to a select, it's just going to apply to an input. Okay. So, all right. So, but here's the, okay, so I haven't applied this data list just yet. But so here's the problem. So, country select, I can say nowhere, and that's going to submit it. Obviously, that's not what I want. Or let's say I do South Africa, but I accidentally make a spelling mistake. So the benefit that the select gives us is that it kind of prevents like these type of things. So the data list to a certain degree does that. Well, let me just show it in action first. So it's literally just put it in a data list like this, and you just literally go input, and you literally just go list and the name of the data list. So the ID that you supplied, up here, ID countries, and that is it. That is literally how you use a data list. So let me show it in action. So if I click it, countries plural. If I click it, then immediately it shows me some options with the actual country code. So if I don't have the values, so for example like that, it's just going to show them like that as if it's an actual select. But if I have values and the values are different from the actual display, then it's going to show both. Unfortunately, I can't zoom in on the data list specifically because that's rendered by the browser, so it's not part of kind of zooming in and so forth. But yeah, so you might have a hard time seeing this, but essentially it shows all the country names and it shows the values, so the country code. So you can now actually have it autocomplete by either the value or the name. So if I start typing SAO, then I get South Africa, South Korea, French Southern Territory, South Georgia. Obviously, as I type South Africa, it, and or I can just go. So if I do Z, A, yeah, it also shows it. So it does auto completion for us. Yeah, and this is really nice. So the only drawback here, there's a couple. So first and foremost, as you saw, the browser handles this by default. It presents it in however it thinks is the best way. I might, if there is time, let me just in the background maybe start spinning up browser stack, so we can just see how it looks in other browsers. But so okay, so first and foremost, so now by the power of recommendation, you know, it kind of prevents us from making typos and whatever, because it gives recommendations. But what we can do as well is we can, so first and foremost, at the moment we can, you know, submit, and we don't want that. We want to have a value in there. So if we go required in here, if we now try and submit, you know, please fill out the field. It's not going to allow us to submit. And then another thing that we can do is, a lot of people don't know about this, but HTML input methods actually have validation by means of regex. So I can go, I think it's called validation, and then I can just type regex. So I can say, let's just say ZA. So, you know, like start of the string, ZA, end of the string. Okay, so now if I select Antarctica, let me just double check. I think I got it wrong. It is pattern, it's not validation. Pattern. Cool. So there's actually client-side validation built into. Cool. Please match the requested format. So obviously now if I go South Africa, that's going to match. Cool. So then it allows us to submit. So obviously what we want to do is we just want to be able to, it just needs to be one of these. So once again, luckily I have prepared that, and I'll just paste it in here. There we go. So now we also have validation. So you're able to just quickly add what you want. So let's say I want to do, let's go Russia or whatever. So Russian Federation. Cool. So that was a lot quicker than actually just having to scroll through a list and finding Russia. But you know, it also prevents us from submitting a value that's not valid. Please match the requested format. Yeah, but so like, then are there cases where you want to allow like a mix between some of the preset options and like a free-form entry? That's not one of them. And yeah, and I think let's maybe go back to the original like ice cream example. So let me just change this. And I think that's maybe a good example where you might want to give a couple of recommended options, and then you also want to like allow people to like override it and input their own if they want. So let's just also change this to ice cream selector, and so just input. So let's just also change this to flavors, and then list flavors. And I'm not going to do values here, just to kind of illustrate, you know, if you don't want like kind of a key value pair. So let's just do option, and let's do vanilla, and let's do option strawberry again, and let's do chocolate. Oh, and then lastly, let's also just add another another C1. So let's do let's just zoom in a little bit. Let me do coffee flavor. Okay. And all right, so now Cool. So you'll see down there, so as I start typing, so C, then it filters it down to chocolate or coffee, V vanilla, or if I just click on it without selecting anything, it just shows me all the options. But let's say I don't want any of those. Let's say I just want mint flavor. And if I click that, we can still submit. So it allows you to choose from one of the pre-selected ones, or actually just enter like a free-form text string. So just quickly, why would you want to use this? Why would you not want to use this? Why would you want to use this? Because it's baked into like the browser. There's no JavaScript libraries, there's no dependencies, you don't need to worry about load order. This works really nice if you have like server-side like templating, and you can just spit these out, because the problem is if you are using a JavaScript library to add them, you probably need to do like some inline script or something, and then you need to spit them out like as a JSON file in that inline script, and then that gets read in here, and yeah, it gets messy really quickly. When do you not want to do that? So unfortunately, the styling of this is 100% up to the browser. So if you want to style it in a very specific way, if you feel strongly about that, you'll probably want some custom solution. Or alternatively, because of like browser support, some browsers might not support it. But then it's just going to fall back to a plain text. So then, if Datalist isn't supported, then, it's not going to do that. So then you just need to like write out chocolate or whatever. And then lastly, validation. So I did speak about kind of like using a pattern to do a regex validation. Once again, also not all browsers might support that, so you might want a JavaScript solution if you want to make sure that like it's always doing the validation. But that being said, it's yeah, you should be doing server-side validation regardless. And then just quickly, before I end off, I think we can do all the questions at the end after everyone's gone. Let me maybe just see if I can do a super quick, let's just do a Mac, show how this data list would look in Safari. Okay. Let me just switch. Okay. Oh, it's trying to do local. Okay. Cool. So you'll see actually the emoji is actually different because Safari has different emojis. And then lastly, is it not actually even supported on Safari? That is a possibility. Maybe I just need to save this. Refresh. Let me just make sure. Oh no. It's because my bad. It's because I removed the actual. Well, anything's possible with Safari, but it is because I removed the actual attribute. All right. Okay. Let's see now. If I refresh over here, I just want to confirm that it's working over here. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's have a look in Safari. Reload the page. Yeah, cool. So this is the way Safari presents it. So you'll see it is a bit different. It goes all the way. It has kind of like this chrome tint and so forth. So yeah, if you're happy giving that styling over to the browser, Datalist is kind of going to work great for you. Yeah, I think that about covers it. I don't know if there's anything specific, Justin, you maybe want me to touch on, or do we want to move on to the next speaker?
Whoops. I think we can move on, Skulk.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
We did have a question, but you answered it anyway, and I have checked that it's been answered.
Okay. Great. Cool. Okay.
Cool.
All
Thanks,
right.
Skulk. Everyone, if there are any other questions, just post them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. Right. Next up is Jane. And Jane's going to be talking about the picture element. Jane, you muted.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to be speaking about responsive image syntax. So I'm going to be focusing on the picture tag. Let me quickly share my screen. Okay. So I wanted to discuss this. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. Okay, stop me. Okay, I know you guys can't message directly, but Justin can stop me if you have any questions. I wanted to speak about HTML and specifically the responsive image syntax today. I want to give a beginner's perspective because I know if you come into the industry that it can be very overwhelming and you don't know really what is going on. So I wanted to give a talk that's basically for everyone, newcomers, and maybe the more advanced people know about this, but could perhaps learn something. Okay, so I'm just going to start from the very beginning, the image tag and the attributes within it. We've all mostly seen this many times. And starting here, I want to speak about what is tricky when it comes to just simply using the image tag and why we would actually want to use anything else. So if we look here at two pictures, they are seemingly identical. This is Hide the Pain Harold. He is my favorite meme. And they seem to be the same, but they have different resolutions. This comes into play a lot, especially with devices of different sizes. So we'll be using our mobiles, but also our tablets and our screens. So resolution comes into play when we're using HTML. If we input an image, it will display differently on the devices. So it'll be the same image. For mobile devices, it could look fine if it's a low resolution image. So that should be fine. Tablet should be okay. Once we start stretching this image out for desktop and for larger screens, it could be pixelated, and that could be very detrimental to the user experience. So another problem we can experience when we're using working with images in HTML is if we are designing with a high resolution image, then the image will appear crisp and beautiful on a larger screen. And on a smaller screen, it will also appear beautiful, but the data usage and the time to load the image on a smaller screen isn't worth the pixels, basically. So you want to kind of have a high-performing website that doesn't lag, that doesn't take up too much time because everyone is busy already, and waiting for a website is just not something that we have the patience to do in today's times. So yeah, these are just two basic problems we could run into, and some considerations. So if we have a high quality image, high resolution, it could result in high data usage and loading speeds. So we just need to pay attention to these three aspects. Okay, so to fix the first problem, which was basically a problem of user experience serving the best image for the screen, and also just making it aesthetically pleasing. You want a high resolution image on high resolution screens and a lower resolution image on smaller and lower resolution screens. So this is the image tag. I'm sure you guys have seen this before. Some common attributes in it. Okay, so Sourceset, we're going to be talking a bit about this attribute. If you have an image, you're planning to use Sourceset, you'd basically upload this image, but in different sizes. So you could upload a family portrait small, family portrait medium, and family portrait large. While using Sourceset, when we input the images into it, the browser will basically decide what image to serve based on pixel density of a screen. So when we're using Sourceset, there's a whole bunch of benefits, which includes byte savings, as you can see, of 70 to 90%. And also, it's a very quick and easy method to use. One limitation to the method, or to the of Sourceset, would be that you're not 100% sure which image the browser is going to decide to display. This is how the image tag would look filled up with information. Here is the Sourceset attribute. So the source is a low-res JPEG. The Sourceset consists of a larger image and the largest image, which is high-res 2x. So the high-res 2x is the largest in terms of pixel density. If we have two devices, and the one is, say, an iPhone with Retina display, and then the other one, an older phone with a lower pixel density, then a browser could decide, using Sourceset, to display the high-res 2 image, which is 2x, on the iPhone, even though the pictures are the same in terms of dimensions. It might serve a higher dimension to this Retina display and a lower dimension, and a lower pixel density to the older device. Okay, so this ensures that the users are getting the best experience they can be getting. The iPhone users will be able to kind of view the best possible pictures and have the best kind of visual experience. Okay, and then another thing we're going to be talking about is addressing the quality and performance. So we're finally at the picture tag. We're going to use this along with media queries. This is a basic picture tag, and here are some attributes. So we can use the picture tag, especially if we have different images for different devices. Sometimes we'll have a big cover image on a website for desktop that could change or be cropped for tablets and mobile, or it could not even, maybe you just don't want it to be displayed on the mobile version. So we're going to use a media queries, and this will help us specify which images the browser will serve and when. This gives us more control, and we aren't left in the dark about what is this browser going to do. Okay, so this is basically what I was talking about. So here we have this beautiful big cover image, and then here on the tablet it's cropped a bit differently. On mobile it maybe it's a completely different image, but yeah, so these are also sized. This is a nice big image. This is sized appropriately to the tablet, and the smaller image is probably a low resolution as well. So we've planned our designs out, and now we know this is how it's gonna look. With the picture tag, we're planning on swapping out the different images, similar to the Sourceset, but a bit different, because Sourceset is used for images that specifically look the same. Then we're also going to use this method to enhance the performance. So with the picture tag, this is how it starts out. We have a source set here. So this is basically a combination, like if we can combine a picture tag and a source set, this is how it will look. Start out with the picture tag, have the source set over here with a 2x photo and a standard photo. So this is the high resolution version. And then we're just telling the computer here, when a screen is larger than 600 pixels, display this image. Otherwise, if it is smaller, then display this image. Okay, so basically, yeah, that's all I've prepared for you guys today. Hopefully, you guys got something from the talk, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks very much, Jane. There are no questions at the moment, but we'll see if any come up as we go along. I'll just add them to the chat. Okay, next up we have Martin, and Martin is going to speak to us about the progress and meter elements. Over to you, Martin.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin. I'm a full stack engineer. I also assist Fetzer with the mentoring sessions, and I'm one of the core members. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the progress and meter elements, which you could actually just think of them as the loading and gauging elements. That's basically what they're doing. Right, so let's look at the differences. Okay, so what is the progress and the meter elements? They are kind of the same, but they're actually not the same. They both sort of show like a little bar with like a visualization that it's sort of filling up, but they actually operate a little bit differently. The progress bar, that is more for the completion of the progress of a task. So just think of like you got a to-do list and it will sort of fill up, or sort of like a loading, or when you even downloading a file, that's actually progressing. The meter, on the other hand, is actually more of a gauge. So just think of maybe sort of like your oven temperature, or what the temperature is outside, or what the rain levels were last night, that type of thing. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is the progress element. As you can see on the screen here, it's sort of just moving around. There's two values. Actually, let me first talk about the actual element. So it's, as mentioned previously, it shows the progress of a task based on a value that you give it and a max value. It doesn't actually take a lot of attributes. It's actually quite a simple element. So let's just look at the two attributes that it takes. The first is the value, which is where the progress is on sort of the display, and then the max, what it takes to actually reach it. If you don't actually specify a value, you start getting this indeterminate sort of, I don't know what you call it, display, where it sort of just bounces around saying like, I don't know when this is going to finish. I'm just going to keep bouncing around like this. So if you give no value, this is the effect that you're actually going to get. Whereas when you got the value, it's going to start sort of growing up. You can actually go and modify this with JavaScript so that you can actually start making it grow if you like. Okay, so let's look at the next thing. When it comes to support, progress is widely supported. As you can see, it's pretty much every single browser on the list is actually supported. It does support progress. Even though it is so widely supported, you won't find it being used always in the wild. Like while I'm actually speaking, I'll go and inspect the YouTube video and go look at the little progress bar, and you'll see that they aren't actually even using the progress bar themselves. So while it is widely supported, not all of the big companies are making use of it. However, we have used it in really, really big e-com systems for progress between a quiz and progress while something was loading, and then it sort of filled up. So it has got its use. I used it in React personally, and it was actually just really wonderful to sort of just pass my props to it from React and just have this thing sort of grow based on the values that are coming in. And it just felt like such a fluid integration with React. Okay, so the accessibility, consider this a control. So with controls, what do you usually do? You need to go and add a label. So you've got your two options there. Let me just switch over and sort of go to the HTML. Okay, so you've got two options here. You've got the one where we wrap the label around the element itself, and that's when you don't actually need to specify an ID because that element is actually wrapped inside of that label. But ALI is very important, or accessibility is very important. We need the web to be inclusive to all. So you will need to make sure that you are doing one of these two options. So the first option is, as I mentioned, you've got the label around it, and there doesn't need to be an ID. And then the second option is probably one you're more familiar with. And personally, I find this the better option because it's easier to sort of handle the styling. Is that you would specify your ID, the ID on the control, and then you would use the for attribute to allocate that label to that ID so that they're basically linked. And this is important for devices like screen readers, so that just imagine a use case of where I had this label status. Sorry, let me actually get that there. If I had the status like this, and it was just sort of a P, like a P tag, or just written there, like a screen reading device isn't going to be able to allocate that writing with that control. It's not going to know that it's actually linked to it. Whereas with the label it being there, it's going to go and state that this is the title for that control. Yeah, here is the name for that control. Right. Something else that you should be actually be doing is between the elements or the tags. Sorry, let me first mention that you need to have a beginning and a closing tag. You can't have like a soft closing tag, so you can't just do progress like this. Sorry. Can't just soft close it like that. You need to have a beginning and an ending tag. But that's good, because what it means that you can do is that in the middle of it, you can actually go and put a value there, so that if ever it's not supported by some kind of browser, and we do know in the list that it is supported by all the browsers, but you don't know what's going to happen in the future. For some reason it's not supported, then at least this value is still going to actually come through, and a person visiting your website, if that doesn't load, they're still going to know that's a 50% value that's there. Yeah, but with that all being said, this is not adding this value here is not making your element accessible. It's not a substitute for accessibility. This is just a fallback. So you still do need to use the label. You must just add this on as well. Okay. Right. So the next one, we're going to look at a meter. The meter is more for like it's actually for gauging something. When we looked at the progress, that was for when something, like I mentioned, it's loading, or you need to do 6,000 steps for the day, and that thing is going to continue to grow. The meter, on the other hand, is for measuring a value that's sort of, just think of like you're measuring the temperature for the day, even though that is going to fluctuate, but it's sort of gauging that value there. What I like to think about is sort of like your oven temperatures. You need to put the oven on at 180 or whatever, and then that would be displayed. Or like there's a picture of a dog here. My opinion is cuteness is quite low, so you know that's actually the gauge for that, and smelliness right up at the end of the scale there. Okay, so let's look at the values that you would use in the meter. So first, you're just going to have the value, and that is where this is in this bar, basically. So you can see the end here. That's the actual value that's inside the meter. Then you've got a min and a max. Sorry, I was meant to actually switch over here. So sorry, I didn't actually realize I didn't switch over. Okay, so there's the dog that I mentioned. And then over here is the bar I'm busy speaking about. Okay, so you've got a value that, I'm just going to repeat what I mentioned earlier. The value is where this is in the control. Okay, basically the measurement of where it is. Then you've got the min and the max. The min is where it is starting. So it's basically the beginning of your range and then the end of the range. That means that you don't actually need to start at 0 or 1. You can start wherever you want. Like I mentioned oven temperatures. You can have it that usually when you're baking, you're not going to bake at 0 degrees or even 10, even 20. You're going to probably start only at like maybe 160. So if you were sort of showing the oven temperatures for a dish or whatever, you would start at maybe 100 and then you cap it out at 120. That's going to give a far better visual representation of the information you're trying to display, as opposed to starting at 100 and then all of your values are only ever going to display at the end. Then that's just not really a good user experience. Okay. Well, sorry about that. Yeah. Then you've got an additional option here. So I just got to reconfigure my stuff now because of that. When we got the progress bar, there's only the value and the max, and it's very, very simple to set up. Whereas with the meter, there is additional options to set a low and a high. And basically what that is you can actually go and set like a lower upper bound and then a higher upper bound. And it's like just really fancy words. We don't need all those fancy words. Basically what it is you're going to sort of create a range within this control. And what's really cool is the browser is actually going to recognize that range and will actually go and adjust the color of the progress of this meter based on this range that you're actually specifying. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch over back to my code. A moment. Okay, so what you can see on the screen now is 3 meters, and I'll just basically walk through them. Now, this has actually got no CSS applied. There's no styling applied to this whatsoever. This is in the browser. Chrome is actually doing this. Firefox will do the same thing, and I think pretty much every browser will do the same thing. So that's what's great about sort of controls like this is it's just sort of that dynamic, and like I would actually even call it sort of interactive. So let's just look at the first one. We've got a min of 0 and a max of 100. So that's min at the beginning and max at the end. Then you've got a low and a high. Now that's specifying where that threshold is going to be when we're going to start dealing with the actual value. So the first one I've actually gone and I've set the value to below 10. Sorry, it's below low. So I've set it to 10, which is underneath 33 or below 33. And therefore it's going to go red. Then for the next one, I've put it in the mid-range. I've put it at 50, which is between 33 and 60, which is between low and high. And now you can see that it's actually gone yellow. And once again, I'm not doing anything. There's no styling here. This is just happening because of this low and this high value, and then the value itself. Then for the last one, I've actually got it at 67, which is above the high. There's more functionality added to this, but I'm not going to climb into that at this stage. So let's go to the next one. Right, and then when it comes to the support, it is widely supported once again, sort of like the other one. What is it? The other one we just covered. But as you can see, it's not supported by Internet Explorer. But that's from my experience now at the workplace. We don't really care about Internet Explorer anymore. It's far too phased out now. We can't keep supporting something like that. It's just beating a dead horse. Right. Okay, and that's the end of my talk.
Thanks very much, Martin. Skulk had a question of sorts. Something like Material UI uses these under the hood, but says he actually doesn't know. I have to confess, I actually don't know myself. I guess we'd need to delve into that, but it's an interesting question. As you say, I mean, the whole point of these talks have been things that aren't used as much as they should be, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if they're not using it. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I used it on an e-com system, and they were pulling in over $100 million a year. And I was able to style it. I can't remember exactly what I did with it. So, to me, this is it's almost like if you've used Visual Basic before, one of those sort of drag and drop coding things. This is one of those tools where I think if we want to display something like that, like a progress bar or like a meter, these are the tools we should be using to create these effects instead of trying to always recreate it ourselves. I really do think that we should start here, and if we can't achieve it, then we will have to go and go our own way about it. It's just a pity that if you go and look at like YouTube and all of that, they're doing their own thing, and I'm not too sure for that exactly. Maybe they can do more things with accessibility. Like I highly suggest actually going and inspecting the way that they handle their progress bar. There's like a lot going on there.
Great. Thanks very much, Martin. If there are any questions, additional questions at the end, we will get to them. Right. So I'm going to do the last presentation of the evening, and that is going to be on details and summary. So I've got just a couple of slides, and then I'll get into a little bit of coding for us so we can see how this all works. Right, so details and summary, what is it? So this is directly from MDN, which is everyone's go-to, I think, when it comes to documentation of anything on the front end. So the details element creates a disclosure widget in which information is visible only when the widget is toggled into an open state, and a summary or label must be provided using the summary element. So the summary element sits inside the details element. Just to note, it's not an accordion, okay? It's sometimes touted as a replacement for an accordion, but it's not an accordion for two reasons. First of all, it doesn't satisfy the roles requirements of the spec, and that is that you must have a heading, a button, and a region role attached to an accordion, and the details and summary element do not have that. And the accordion spec also says that only one panel should be visible at a time, and that isn't something that the details and summary gives you out of the box, so to speak. Right. Why is this the case? So because summary actually has an ARIA role of a landmark role of button attached to it via the browser. And if we look at the accessibility tree, we'll see that that role is actually ascribed to a button, which means it nullifies the semantic content of any elements inside it. So the way a button works is if you have a button and then you add if you have something that has a role of button, a landmark role of button, and you add anything else inside that, all semantic content that might be attached to those elements is stripped. So you're losing a lot of accessibility there. So for example, you can have a button inside an H1, and the H1 will then be exposed by screen readers, etc. But if you have an H1 inside a button, the H1 will not show up when you're navigating by headings. And the accordion spec requires that you have some kind of a header role on your accordion. So details does not replace accordion in any way. You can hack it to do so, but that's not recommended. Okay. So if you did want it to do something like that, you'd need to add ARIA controls and ARIA expanded, as well as additional keyboard interaction that's required of an accordion. And you'd need to start getting into writing JavaScript for that. And that kind of goes against the principle of just having an HTML element that works out of the box. So one thing that is supported in JavaScript that I recommend you can use if you wish to, which is a toggle event. So you can easily attach a toggle event listener onto your details, and then you have an open property that you can hook into to use. Right, so I'm just going to go and share. Which one is it now? That's not the right one. Sorry, I should have put this up before. No. There we go. Okay. Sorry, can everyone see the code pen? Skulk, Martin. There we go. Sorry. Okay. Right. So I'm in CodePen here. I've just done a little quick thing here, reset nonsense that we don't need to worry about in the CSS. And then I've just put in a main tag with a display grid, etc., blah, blah, blah. And that just gives us this and then an H1. All right. So the way we do details is we start with a details element. And then within that, we have a summary tag. And as you can see, once I add that, I'm automatically getting this little chevron icon here in the browser. And if I click on it, it shows that something is happening. So if we go here and we type something in the summary and just wait for it to refresh, we'll see we now have a text in there. And you can have whatever you like in there. You can put any HTML tags you want to inside the summary. And then, but very importantly, that is wrapped within the details tag. I can now go and add some lorem ipsum, and you'll see now when I click on my summary, it's now going to expose that. Okay, so that gives us our disclosure widget, as simple as that. A details tag, within that a summary, and then whatever we want to be hidden and exposed. Anything that comes after the closing summary tag will automatically be exposed when we click on this element. And you can see the little chevron changes direction and orientation and so on. Okay, now we can style this in a number of ways. So I'm just going to make a couple of quick little changes here. I've already written this CSS, so I'm just going to uncomment it. So here we see, as we refresh, I'm adding a background color to the summary, and it's this kind of yellowish color. I'm changing the color of the text, which is this here, and I'm just giving it a bit of padding. Okay. So we can add all sorts of CSS properties to this. So for example, if we wanted it rounded, we could add a border radius, and I'm just going to make that 0.5 rem, and you'll see now it is now rounded. But that's only affecting the summary. Okay. Within the details itself, we can say, okay, let's go and give that a bit of padding because it's a little bit too close. So we can say padding 2 rem, for example, and sorry, that was an error. If we want to, let me rephrase that. If we want to have styles applied to what's inside the summary, we actually have to wrap it in some kind of a an HTML tag. So I'm just going to create a paragraph, and we'll just do that lorem again, and we'll just close the paragraph. And now if I go details and I go P and I go padding 2 rem, we should see now we've got some padding happening within this. And you can see there the padding is now being applied inside our details and summary. Now we can change what this particular little icon here looks like as well. This uses a CSS pseudo element, similar to before and after in some ways, called the marker element. All list items have this as well, which actually tells us that the display property applied by the browser to the summary element is actually display a list item. Okay. So I'm just going to uncomment this, and you can see now we've got summary marker, and we write that the same way we write before and after with double colon. But for Safari, we have to include the WebKit prefix. Okay, so this will work in all browsers. This will work in Safari. And I've made the color transparent, and you can see now that the color is transparent. It's not there. So what that means is that we can essentially change the way this looks. So if I go in here and I say, okay, let's make it blue, we'll see now when it refreshes that it is now blue. Okay, and we can change the font size also on the marker, and that will automatically change the font size of the arrow. So I'm just going to make it 40, and you can see now it's much bigger, but of course now we're getting some horrible layout problems. So, right, let's just undo that and go back to where we were. Now, you'll notice that there's no animation or anything like that. This just appears, but we can add animation properties to this because, and I'm just going to inspect this quickly and I'll show you what it looks like when we click on it. You'll see there's my, let me just make this a bit bigger. You'll see there's my details and my summary, my paragraph, exactly my HTML here. Now, when I click on it, let's just look at that attribute, and you'll see the details now has an open attribute. So that is automatically added, and we can hook into that in our CSS. So if I close it, it goes away. If I open it, it's there. So we have that attribute open. Right. So if we go and just write a little quick keyframe animation, and we'll just call it sweep. And this is very simple. Let me just clean this up a bit. We're saying at 0%, let's have opacity 0. And we're saying at 100%, opacity 1. And then at 0, we are just translate y, which means up minus 10. So we're moving the element up 10. And then at 100%, we are putting it back in its normal place. And now I can use that keyframe animation to add a little animation to my summary, to my details when it's open. Right. So I can say, because we have this property, let's just get back there, because we have our open attribute, I can say when this is open, okay, look for the summary, okay, and then anything that is adjacent to the summary. This is our adjacent CSS selector, and the star just means everything. So here we're saying everything that's close to summary. Apply our sweep animation. Okay, and you'll see now, if I open this, we've got a little animation where it kind of slides in and the opacity moves nicely. Much, much better. Right. Now, if I go and I add another details on the page, and I'm just going to copy this one and we'll put it in here. And okay, so this is now just to demonstrate why this does not qualify as an accordion, is that I can open this, and they are independent of each other. So the way an accordion traditionally works, and also very importantly is spec'd by the W3C, is if I open one, when I open the next one, the previous one should close. Okay, and that is not what details does. It's purely a disclosure widget. Of course, you could use JavaScript to do that, but you're much better off using a well-constructed, accessible component that's already been built for accordions. Okay, I can also say, okay, I want one of these to be open on page load, and I can do that simply by putting the open attribute on it in the HTML. And you can see there now my first one is open, and when I close it, it closes. But again, they are independent of each other. So adding the open attribute will make an element automatically open. Okay, just going to copy, just going to comment these out. So I've used this HTML element a lot, and I'll show you a real-world example of something that actually appears on a client site. and I'll show you how you can actually do some very sophisticated styling of this. So I've got this details element here, and I'm just going to uncomment it. Oh, let me try that again. Okay, so this is something we built for a client of ours, and I'll show you the actual page example as well. There's supposed to be an icon here, but that's not showing because this is on CodePen. But if you look at the styling that we've done on this, this is actually a grid. So you can actually apply a display grid to your summary, and then you can apply your grid template columns, etc. And when I open it, you can see here we have another element within here with a div, and this has also got a grid applied to it to display a grid, and we can see there's our grid attached to that. So and that's for responsiveness, right? And then we have fully workable checkboxes, radio buttons that live in the summary in order to make a selection if you wish to. And then how this looks on the actual page is like this, and it's for selecting correspondence preferences and things like that. So we've got all of these items here, which you can open independently of each other to see what the details are, and you can make your selection via the radio buttons in any way that you like. And if we go to a responsive view, you can see that just using the grid, we can just change the orientation as we go. So we have a fully workable disclosure widget with no JavaScript at all applied to this. Okay, there's no JavaScript at all. And we're just swapping down and up and so on. And that's just purely using HTML and CSS. Okay, that's it from details and summary. Are there any questions? I'm just going to add everyone back.
So I have a couple for all of you, but I think we can maybe start working through some of the ones that were shared in the comments.
Yeah.
Okay, you already went ahead and.
Yeah, sorry. So Chris, well, Skulk, I see that you made a web typography comment, so thanks for that.
Can you share that one quickly? Just for visibility. Yeah, I can't remember when the last.
My interests are varied. Okay, so Christine asked, should the body of text not be within a p tag? Yeah, I think I was just demonstrating there. So yeah, you should definitely be wrapping your whatever you put in the details inside whatever appropriate HTML element. Yeah, absolutely, it should be. What would be the main benefit of this over an accordion? Well, the main benefit of this is no JavaScript required. Yeah, so no external dependencies. It's just 2 HTML tags, and the browser takes care of the rest. And you can style it as you like in CSS. So it's really fantastic for performance. Yeah, but as I say, this is not an accordion in the traditional sense of how we consider things to be accordions. There's no, if you want accordion functionality and behavior from this, then you need to write a whole bunch of custom scripts, and you are probably better off to using an accordion component that's nice and accessible and usable.
Can I maybe interject there with a question of my own, for curiosity's sake? Would you say that if you were to, regardless of the reason, like technically speaking, if you were to create your own accordion, would starting with summary be a good starting point, or would you just start like flat with like a list element or divs or something?
Yeah. You see, the problem with accordion with summary is that the browser has that aria, that role of button built in. And that messes with accordion behavior for accessibility. So have I disappeared?
No, you're still here.
Okay. Yeah. So because of that, that accessibility concern, if I needed an accordion in the traditional sense of one is closed, one is open, etc., I would just start with my standard header tag and move down through that. Yeah, with JavaScript. Yeah.
Not to digress too much, but how would you then toggle the accordion? Would you use just a button that's outside of the accordion?
Do you mean
like semantically? How would you?
So you can have
a role for that.
So you can have a button inside a header role, but you can't have it the other way around.
I see.
Yeah.
See. Yeah, because the one is inline. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
And if you put anything inside a button, its semantic properties are just become null and void, no matter what they are.
It's kind of interesting that they went this direction, but it's probably for backward compatibility reasons. But regardless,
yeah. I'm just looking. Stuart had a question. I suppose changing the chevron to a desired icon would have to be customized. Correct. There are two ways to do this. As Skulk mentioned, you can target the default arrow in CSS via marker, and that works exactly the same way as you would use before or after pseudo elements. Or you can just hide it and include your own pseudo element. Yeah. So one thing you can't do is change its position. If you're just using marker, you can't change its position. It's always going to be on the left. You can change the way it looks. You can change the icon just using a background image, whatever you like, but you cannot change its position. If you want to change its position, you need to hide the marker using... There are different ways to do it.
I just use color transparency. Transparent, because it's effectively like Unicode.
Correct. It's actually just a border triangle. So you can just say color transparent and it's gone. Or you can use, you can actually just say WebKit marker display none. So that's fairly easy to do. There are lots of examples online. Yeah.
I can maybe, like, if you allow me to share my screen for a quick second, I can maybe just show how like I've done mine. So I have some of them on my website. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, can you just zoom in a bit?
Yeah. Okay. So so I just have these. These are effectively summary and details. So I kind of similar to what you did, Justin. I just have a transition with the transform and scale Y. So the scale just gets adjusted. And then I removed the marker over here. And then I just used after pseudo element to kind of do that. And also just a transform on the pseudo element to do that little. So if I just go inspect, you'll see I'm using some BEM here. So yeah, marker, I just do color transparent. And then after, so this is a common trick. This is kind of a like a talk in its own right. But I just essentially do 4 borders and set all of them transparent except for one, and then it just kind of like does a little arrow. So this is all just CSS. Yeah, so just by pseudo elements, so marker and after. And I think I just position absoluted. So, like if you want, I can move it around, up, down, make it bigger, have it transform like, let's just say 360 degrees. Yeah. You get the idea.
Thanks,
cool.
Scott.
All right. No worries.
Question for Martin. Can the colors of a meter be styled via CSS?
Yes, you can actually style them using pseudo classes. You can actually go and style it. You can even animate it. There's actually a really good thread on CSS tricks where a developer goes and it does it with all the different browsers and goes to, I think he tries to emulate Mac OS to look like Mac OS. I don't know if I should share the link.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I remember that article. I think it's by Anna Tudor, who does really crazy stuff with CSS. It's if we're thinking about the same one, it's incredibly in depth and long.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just looking through the comments. One for Jane. Super informative. Thank you. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah. I have an actual question for Jane. So you started out by showing kind of Sourceset as an attribute, and showing how like you would use it for Retina and so forth. Like, I'm going to be 100% honest. I've just used picture tag. I've never done it in that way. Why would you do the one or the other?
So, when it comes to picture quality and displaying a picture that has the best resolution for a screen, then I think Sourceset would probably be adequate enough and quick enough to just upload 2 different sizes and then carry on. Then the picture tag is more kind of it takes a bit longer. So I think if you're using exactly the same image, Sourceset should be fine. But if you're using images that are maybe slightly different or cropped differently, then I think the picture tag would be better. And also in terms of if you're using the picture tag, then you have Sourceset within it. So I personally also have only used the picture tag because Sculk taught me the picture tag. But I wanted to cover...
That's a good reason to use it.
I wanted to cover the Sourceset because it's something that you can also use within the picture tag. And I think that kind of also optimizes the whole the whole situation. I don't know. What do you guys think about it?
Justin, you're probably pretty qualified to speak to that.
Personally, I've also only ever used picture. It just feels neater to me for some reason. I don't know why. Like having a containing element and then the other things inside that.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And I think also that whole kind of like having images for different, like for Retina and so forth, I like that kind of feels like an era that has kind of come and gone. Like I don't know when was the last time I took like whether something is Retina or not into consideration for my image sizes. I usually just go by viewport size.
Yeah. So picture tag.
Yeah.
I think we have a general consensus here.
So one thing that's also maybe worthwhile mentioning that you didn't specifically touch on is that you can also use the picture tag because it's essentially kind of like a switch statement. So it's just like once it hits something that's true, then it shows that. Otherwise, it keeps on falling back. So you can do it for image formats as well. Specifically things like WebP, which isn't universally supported by all browsers. You can have a WebP version of the image, which is like the compression is a lot better than like standard like JPEGs and things. And then if the browser doesn't support it, you can fall back to like JPEG or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I'm curious. I know that WordPress does this. That it abstracts a lot of this away. Jane, you might know. Justin, you might also know.
I'm not sure to what extent it's customizable. I know a lot of things are customizable if you use the Elementor plugin, but it has to be the pro version. So I'm not really sure in terms of like pure WordPress how customizable that would be.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. One from Lars around display none collapses the space it occupies, and that's on the chevron on the summary element. And no, it doesn't actually. It doesn't affect the height of the element at all. So you can use display none. I just prefer to use color transparent because it's not. The element then still remains. Yeah. I'm not sure if there are any accessibility benefits to any of that, but I just prefer not to remove it completely. Yeah.
I kind of treat it as a bullet list.
Yeah. Like if you're doing list style type none is very different to display none. Yeah. That just removes the marker. Yeah. So it's not because it's a pseudo element. It's not affecting the layout of its parent. Yeah.
So I see there's a question about lazy loading images. I don't think that's necessarily specific to the picture tag, but maybe we can take a couple of seconds to touch on that.
Sure.
Justin, you maybe want to speak to that?
Yeah, so this is a relatively new thing that's been introduced to browsers. It does use JavaScript, but it doesn't use JavaScript, or I don't know, it depends on the browser really. But it's not anything we need to write on the client side. Yeah. It's baked into the browser. Previously, if we wanted to do lazy loading, we had to write that JavaScript ourselves and apply it on the client side in the front end. We no longer need to do that. And this is in most modern browsers. You're not going to get this in Internet Explorer or in old Microsoft Edge, but New Edge, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Brave, all these other niche browsers and so on. Simply adding the loading equals lazy attribute is going to give you lazy loading out of the box. Again, it's like, these elements, meter progress, details, etc., where the browser takes care of all the scripting that's required, and you don't need to worry about it. It adds no additional overhead to your page. Yeah. So just as a matter of course, whenever you have an image, add loading equals lazy, and the browser will take care of it. It will only load once it's scrolled into view. Yeah. It's a really great addition to browsers. Yeah. So use it without any worries about having to write any scripts. And if you do have lazy loading scripts, you can rip them all out.
So the only thing is, you need to set an explicit height and width. It doesn't know that beforehand. Otherwise, you're going to get a million reflows. So that's
Correct.
just something to be mindful of. If you're not setting explicit height and width, and you have like an entire gallery of things that are lazy loading, you're probably doing more harm than good through firing like a million reflows. Just to expand on that a little bit, what Skulk's referring to is actually within your HTML applying width and height attributes to your images. We always used to do this, us old people. Well,
me. We always used to add width and height attributes to our images back in the day. And then responsive design came along and said, no, don't do that because your images need to scale based on the viewport, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But now, with aspect ratio, lazy loading, and intrinsic sizing, it's now become important to actually put those width and height attributes back. Yeah. So whenever you are adding a width, an image, you should be adding a width and height attribute, especially if you're using aspect ratio. Yeah.
But those are, sorry, so like just asking out of curiosity, those are still like kind of aspect ratio, and those things are still, it's not recommended spec yet, right?
No, it is.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I think last time I looked at it, it was still like not recommended spec yet. Okay.
No, it is. I'm just checking can I use
because I remember I used to do that padding hack.
The
thing.
padding trick, the padding hack, yeah.
Position absolute.
Aspect ratio is now supported everywhere except IE, Opera Mini.
Oh yeah. So everywhere basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if people are familiar with that padding hack, but it was like positioning an element absolutely with inside a container, and then working out a padding percentage based on the aspect ratio.
Yeah,
crazy stuff.
You'd set. I remember you'd set like the padding bottom to like 93%, 93.9875, like some random long number.
Yeah.
That was a nightmare. Yeah.
Now you can get rid of that, and you can just go aspect ratio 16:9, 4:3, whatever it might be, and that works on iframes as well. You know? If you're embedding an iframe, you can apply an aspect ratio to that now as well, and it will be responsive, which is fantastic, because we used to have to do that horrible padding hack whenever we embedded a video from a third party. Yeah. Yeah. So aspect ratio on images is great, and if you have differently sized images that aren't 16:9 or 4:3 or whatever, you could just work out the aspect ratio and then apply it in your CSS. It's a very nice feature.
Yeah, I would love for us to do like an entire talk just on unit measurements.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Cool. So I think Lars asked a question. Okay. So his was specifically regarding the display none. So I think I asked a question about whether Material UI and those libraries actually use Progress and Meter under the hood. So I'm actually just going to go now and have a look.
I think all of our answer to that was we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Let me have a look. So, not looking good. Looks like it's a div. Interesting. Yeah, I think theirs is a yeah. Okay. So I think I maybe also wanted to ask is Justin, maybe you might know this. So in terms of kind of I don't know what you call it, announcement, or I think it has a very specific name, but in terms of semantics and so forth, for like when like something pops up or so forth, there is a specific, I think, ARIA class, ARIA attribute for like whether something should announce itself.
Do you mean like a toast?
Yeah, let me. I think it's like a notification, live regions.
ARIA live regions, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious whether like Meter or Progress has like kind of implicit live regions or not. Like,
don't know.
Would you need to inspect it to actually see the value, or because I'm curious about that. Or would it announce itself? Okay, that's maybe a question for for HTML can do that part too.
Yeah, I don't have an answer.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it's sad like that these things aren't getting used as much as they should, and like it's 90% of the time just people don't know they exist.
Scott, do you think that Progress hasn't been used by MUI or Material UI and these other places because there's limitations, or just because what's the point?
I actually don't know. Like, so Material UI tends to be quite good when it comes to kind of semanticness, compared to some of the other libraries. I actually don't know.
I think what's happened in a lot of cases is these HTML elements were all announced long ago. We're talking like
2013.
I was delving into the history of details, and it's actually 8 years old. And I'm not talking about an idea in the a suggestion. Actually, completed spec 8 years ago.
Standardized. Yeah.
Standardized, and Meta and Progress are around the same time. Picture came out long ago. Datalist is the most recent, but that's also been out for years. Yeah, these didn't just pop up a month ago. And I think what's happened is that the browser makers have been very, very slow in implementing them. And so people just went and built their own ways of doing this. And the browsers come along and they go and they implement. But I mean, if you're just using a framework already that's got all this stuff in it, and the frameworks, they went and just superseded it. I think in the same way, like all the new input types, like color pickers in the browser, date pickers, time pickers. These are all just one attribute on an input, and you get it. And it's supported in many, many, many places now, but no one uses them. I mean, do you ever use input type equals date? Anyone?
Yeah, actually, I do.
You do. Okay.
But so, like, it's also tricky because but like that being said as well, I do a lot of projects that are a lot closer to the metal than I guess the average developer would.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I tend to do like web component type stuff and so forth, where like most developers have a lot of that abstracted away. So I might be the exception here that proves the rule.
The outlier.
Yeah, but no, I hear what you're saying. I think also part of it is it's kind of a chicken and egg thing as well. Like with the HTML outline, is that because no one uses it, like it doesn't get built on. Like it doesn't get expanded. So for example, like what I mentioned about like kind of the live regions and so forth, like that's an actual thing that I would think would be relevant. But because, for example, if you're using a screen reader or whatever, like your experience of the progress would be, I guess, more reactive. Like you wouldn't like tab on it all the time to just see, okay, what's it now? You'd like expect it to keep you updated in terms of the progress. But my guess is like that type of thing hasn't been fleshed out just because like it's not being used that much. So, like Firefox already said they're kind of like going to draw the line in terms of what things they're just completely going to jettison.
They actually have a public list.
And also, it just also feels like there's such like bigger fish to fry. And I never I've made it my life's goal to, whenever I get the opportunity, to mention that regex is broken in Safari now for 5 years. And they haven't indicated whether they are actually ever going to fix it. But regex in Safari doesn't work according to the actual W3C specification.
Like also related to what we've been talking about today, the details element cannot have a display property of flex in Safari. That's the only place, and that has been a bug for 4 years.
Yeah. Fun times. Okay, but
On the other hand, Chrome still hasn't shipped subgrid. 3 years after everyone else. So, swings and
sure. No. I hear what you say, but like this kind of feels a bit like both sides. Like these are different
Safari's
paradigms.
terrible.
Like not having a working regex in your browser compared to not supporting subgrid,
No, I know. No, of course. No, Safari is extremely problematic. Apple in general when it comes to the web. But that's a different meetup.
Yeah, unless you guys want this to end like at 11 tonight, I think we just like stop the discussion now on Apple. But for what it's worth, so for January we have lined up, I can never pronounce his name, Maximiliano Flirtman. Sure.
It's good enough.
This is, like, I don't feel guilty because he won't be able to pronounce my name. But say he actually wrote a really great article, kind of called "Think Lazy," where he literally just says, like we need to start calling Apple out and calling them what they are, which is essentially bullies. But yeah. Cool, but let's move on to the next topic. But he's gonna speak about PWAs in January. If anyone is interested in that, I kind of consider him the authority on progressive web apps.
Definitely.
Well, the independent authority. You have a lot of people from like Google, and you have a lot of people from Microsoft talking about PWAs. But like I kind of consider him like the independent person who doesn't necessarily. Like there's no overlap with kind of his actual company that he works for, whatever. He's just like someone who's super interested in PWAs. So yeah, I highly encourage everyone to join that.
Great.
Yeah.
I think we can bring it to a natural end. Thanks so much, Skulk, Martin, Jane. Jane, your first talk went very well. Well done.
Thanks, Justin.
And thanks to everyone who joined us, and for all the questions and the nice comments. It's much appreciated. This will be available for you to watch anytime, and we will share the live recording once it's all rendered properly and everything, and the chat will also be replayed. So look out for us in 2022.
Cool.
Thanks all.
Right. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.